Ladies and gents, PepperBelly here, and today I want to talk about The Division, and whether or not it holds up to the hype, lives up to expectations, and retains some longevity in the gameplay through to endgame. Those of you who have seen my previous videos on The Division will know the amount of time I put into them, and the fact that I enjoyed the experience overall for it being an RPG third-person shooter similar to my all-time favorites like Mass Effect. Well, in the final release, I put in 40 hours so far, completing every single side mission, encounter, and the story missions that are available to you, which pretty much leaves me with the endgame activities, such as Dailies and the Dark Zone. So let's first talk about the main single-player or co-op experience. If you recall from the beta, if you took part in it, you started off with a cutscene flying into Manhattan aboard a chopper, starting off at level 4. Now this led to some to believe that there was an intro being left out for the main game, which turned out to be true. You start off in Brooklyn, you know, the area they showed off in all those wonderful E3 trailers, and complete a few side missions that ultimately lead you to your departure into Manhattan to begin your main game. Now once you reach Manhattan, it's really not that different from what you've probably seen in the beta, and in fact, in a lot of ways it's near identical, and not in a good way. I was hoping for roaming gangs, tons of NPCs roaming the streets, but unfortunately it still felt lifeless. Now I understand the atmosphere the game is going for, which is a city dying, but considering the amount of enemies you kill and the population of New York itself, you'd expect at least a little more activity in the streets doing all sorts of different things, instead of the repeated fighting over scraps, thugs looting corpses, or a dog intimidating a couple. All in all, it's slightly disappointing on that front, but the core gameplay and the mission design themselves make things much more enjoyable. Every area of Manhattan is split up into levels, like most MMORPGs you're familiar with. You start off in a lower level area like 4 to 6, and gradually clear areas moving from safe house to safe house, reading the bulletin boards and talking to the commanders there, completing side missions and encounters in that specific area until you move on to the next. Along the way, there will be main story missions in some of those areas as well, usually with a specific level recommended to be able to complete it. So naturally, you're basically moving around the world in a linear fashion, grinding through the repetitive side missions and encounters, leveling up so that you can complete the main missions, equip better gear, and upgrade your base of operations to gain access to new abilities. Now the story itself can be intriguing. Like, I know there's a lot of people out there that are talking poorly about the story, and of course, if you're playing with friends, it'll be hard to follow along, but if you're running through by yourself, some things really do stand out and bring the atmosphere to life. Finding tapes or cell phone messages that are left behind to get a glimpse into the struggle following the tragic event, finding echoes that reveal specific moments in time, video recordings, and so on all do a good job shaping the world that you're currently embedded in and trying to save. And I can honestly say that a lot of the story and lore is locked behind those intel packets that you find throughout the world, instead of within the main missions themselves. The main story missions are about what is happening now, and what you're doing, while the intel packets are diving into the past, revealing that struggle for survival, the fall of society, and the loss of humanity, turning to violence for survival. The only problem is that finding those intel packets become tedious and not worth the effort. Even though I gained a perk that allows all the intel locations once you complete every single side mission encounter in the area to be revealed, I still found myself not wanting to bother with it, instead focusing on what the game is really about, which is grabbing that loot and speccing your character. So let's talk about the gameplay. It's bullet spongy. Yes, we established this already a million times in the past, and it's universally known. Although Tom Clancy remains in the title, realism isn't there at all. Authenticity, on the other hand, of the environment, world, weapons, and so on are there in a pretty good way. So on some level, I suppose you could say that the use of Tom Clancy's name could be justified, but I don't entirely agree with that assertion. Being that it's an RPG and enemies take about 1 trillion bullets to kill, give or take, it offers depth to the combat beyond who simply got an accurate shot off first. Abilities play an important role in this regard, utilizing them to gain the upper hand in firefights, whether it be providing suppressing fire and aggro with a turret, dropping mobile cover to use when you want to set up a superior firing position, or dropping a healing station to keep yourself and your friends combat effective. The truth is, this kind of depth in shooters can't exist without bullet spongy enemies and RPG elements. That's the entire point of it. And although you're killing people in a highly realistic environment, shooting a man wearing a hoodie and jeans a bajillion times in the face, for me and many others, it's easy to look past that disconnection from reality because I know it's an RPG and it's about obtaining better gear so that it takes less and less bullets to kill someone. Now, I like to compare this game to Mass Effect, being both RPGs and third-person shooters, very similar in the idea of acquiring better gear and weapons, in addition to using abilities to gain the upper hand. Now, I loved Mass Effect. It's one, if not my all-time favorite game. Sure, it isn't a hardcore tactical shooter like you're familiar seeing on my channel, but it's still a game I thoroughly enjoy both for its combat and story. Now, Mass Effect can get away with the fact that it takes many bullets to kill someone because it takes place in the future with shields, kinetic barriers, and combat armor that isn't present in the slightest within the Division. All the Division has are knee pads and chest armor. The rest are holsters, backpacks, and other items that don't really contribute to bodily protection. So I can understand how some people can't get past the idea of unarmored men and women tolerating a shit ton of bullets to the face and body. But if you're like me, focusing on the gameplay itself, setting aside the level of realism, you'll probably find something to enjoy. All that said, once you complete everything, the repetitive side missions, the encounters, and the story missions, then what? Well, like I said earlier, you got Dailies and the Dark Zone. Dailies are just repeats of the main story missions on a harder difficulty. Usually you'll get 3 dailies, 2 missions on hard and 1 on challenging, which you unlock once you reach level 30. It's entirely possible to solo through on hard difficulty, but challenging, as you guessed it, is challenging. It recommends a squad of 4, and I'd advise you follow that recommendation. Enemies gain a significant amount of health and armor in comparison to hard, requiring triple or more damage and DPS to put down. Enemies don't really behave any differently either. There's been some criticism of the AI's behavior, but for the most part, they're challenging. They'll flank you, suppress you, snipe you, bash you, whatever their trait and enemy type is reflects their behavior in combat. And the last thing you want happening is some shotgun jabroni getting on your flank to put you down in 2 or 3 shots. The Dark Zone, the PvP zone, is near identical to the PvE zone. Only that enemy mobs are more frequently roaming the streets, they all have armor, and elites are more present, and other players can kill you if they so choose. The thing is, currently, the penalty is so high for dying as a rogue that it's exceedingly rare to find that one person or group willing to go rogue. So 5 hours of progress could be wasted by dying as a rogue, and for most people, it's simply not worth it, and understandably so. There's just no real risk-reward incentive to go rogue currently. And so far, Ubisoft Massive has mentioned that they're planning on addressing this issue, and hopefully soon, because PvP is great when it actually happens. Otherwise, people just roam around farming mobs like most traditional RPGs. It reminds me a lot of Arcade's Endgame when it first released actually, with everyone from all factions farming mobs in a small zone with the occasional PvP encounter. So as you can probably tell, the endgame gets very repetitive. Farming mobs for gear, extracting said gear, equipping it to increase damage output to make farming more gear easier. Of course, you can also craft, but with that recent update that dramatically lowered the amount of Phoenix credits you obtain to craft high-end items, it seems less appealing than simply farming mobs for that hopefully good drop. You can also buy purple or superior gear from the Dark Zone vendors, only you have to be level 30 in the Dark Zone as well to be able to purchase anything, or for that matter, even open some crates spread throughout the Dark Zone. This to me was a massive oversight, essentially screwing over a ton of players that have waited until they hit level 30 to enter the Dark Zone, only to find out you have to level to 30 again within the Dark Zone to even be able to purchase any item. And keep in mind, the Dark Zone leveling goes all the way to 50. Some of the blueprints require being a level 50 within the Dark Zone. That's a ton of farming outside of just gaining loot and crafting materials. In fact, the only requirements I have seen for Dark Zone items is only 30 and 50. Nothing less, nothing in between. So in essence, you're grinding to grind some more, with no real incentive to engage in PvP encounters. It'd be nice if they had an actual PvP zone with 0 consequences for players to compete in addition to the Dark Zone, so at least there's some incentive to get the best gear possible, because right now, once you get it all, then what? And that's the problem. There isn't truly an end game. If you had all the best items you can possibly acquire in the game, what is there left to do? Nothing. Of course, there's a ton of add-ons and DLC that'll be coming in the future, some of which is entirely free, but we don't really have any idea how that's going to prolong the longevity of the game itself with tons of endgame activities. In that regard, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. So that pretty much sums it up. Even with those aforementioned problems, I still find myself having fun within the game. I mean, I did clock 40 hours since its release, but I worry if I'll get bored rather soon, and in some ways I already feel that way. Somebody asked me on a past video if I purchased this game, how I'd play it, and so far it's looking to shape up exactly as I predicted, being addicted to playing it until I acquire all the best items, then get bored and want nothing to do with the game again. Hopefully, Ubisoft Massive can prove me wrong in the long run. My name's been PepperBelly. Thank you guys for joining me today on this video, and I'll see you on the next one.